Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, July 19th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about a brand new lawsuit in the state of Wisconsin seeking to redraw the congressional maps ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. Now, if you feel like you're getting deja vu or that you remember a story like this from a few months ago, that is correct. The state of Wisconsin saw a lawsuit that went directly to the state Supreme Court asking them to redraw the congressional maps ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. But the Wisconsin Supreme Court rejected the case, wouldn't even hear it, and didn't give any explanation or reason as to why they did so. And it fueled a lot of speculation. After Democrats won Susan Crawford's seat in the state of Wisconsin, they retained control of the Wisconsin State Supreme Court, and it made them fundamentally question, was this win in vain? But unpacking this set of discussion and the analysis that has followed since the rejection of the case by the Wisconsin Supreme Court, a lot of people expected that if the Wisconsin Supreme Court had taken this up without it going through any lower court, the United States Supreme Court would intervene and overturn their decision. Ultimately, the hope here, seemingly from the Wisconsin Supreme Court, at least what Democrats are hoping their expectation was that if it goes through a lower court, they could then confirm that decision rather than just unpack it and provide any type of basis as to why they're deciding one way or the other, very similar to how they decided to not take this case up in the first place. So again, the idea here is that with this new lawsuit, it goes to the Dane County Court, Dane County being one of the more Democratic areas across the state, and hoping that a lower court judge decides that the Wisconsin state's congressional map must be redrawn on the basis of unconstitutional partisan gerrymandering. If they successfully make that case, the Wisconsin State Supreme Court can use said majority and decide that they will not hear the case and that they will essentially reaffirm the lower court's decision. Now, of course, this is tricky. The legal battles that surround constitutionality around congressional maps almost always end up at the United States Supreme Court. So it's a very difficult thing to see, at least early on, that this isn't going to be something that is litigated beyond months, potentially pushing past the 2026 midterm elections. But it is good news for Democrats at baseline that they're not giving up the fight in the state of Wisconsin simply because the state Supreme Court rejected their initial case. There is some merit, absolutely, in going through a lower court system and allowing them, especially a more known, more partisan court, to say that these maps are just simply unfair. And again, a slight advantage in the liberal majority for the Democrats in Wisconsin can reaffirm that decision in a much easier way than if the case had just gone directly to the state Supreme Court. And while this isn't the scenario that Democrats would have envisioned or have envisioned for the state of Wisconsin, it is one that might end up advantageous for them in the long run that benefits them. It prevents potentially any type of national intervention from the United States Supreme Court. It allows the state Supreme Court to have some additional level of nonpartisanship and unbiased nature that they wouldn't have if they were just to take it up and rule by party line. So it will be a lot of that in terms of optics, and I think that is the whole thing here for the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And this new lawsuit, too, again, isn't giving up. They look at the 2026 midterms and they're hoping that they can do it ahead now. And so going to the Dane County Circuit Court, which again, just for context, looking at Dane County in terms of its Democratic region, let's see, Kamala Harris got about 75% of the vote here to Donald Trump's 23%. So we know that this area is overwhelmingly Democratic. The judge here is going to be more favorable towards the Democratic Party. They will likely rule in the favor of the Democrats here. But of course, this is going to be contested. It's going to go to the state Supreme Court, and then it's going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. However, you have a lot more cover if you have more court decisions to rely on, and if Wisconsin's constitution is interpreted as striking down this map, saying the Republican Party gerrymandered the map, which is the argument they are making, and you can see it. I'll show you in just a moment exactly why this map is seen as unfavorable towards the Democratic Party in an unfair way, then we will likely see Wisconsin's map redrawn before 2026 or potentially before 2028. Now, looking back at the last set of elections in the state of Wisconsin, we can see here in 2024, I have 2026 pulled up, but in 2024, Republicans won the popular vote across the state by about 2.9%, which is impressive. It's a victory larger than Donald Trump's on the presidential level, and it shows that the Republican Party had some level of reach that some Democrats just simply did not across the state. But it's still a close state. 3-point margin should not translate to where the Republicans got in terms of their actual respective seat share, which is about 75% of the congressional representation in the state of Wisconsin. Now, these numbers seem a lot more intense because there are fewer seats in Wisconsin. Less than 10. There are 8 across the state, which Democrats currently hold 2 and Republicans currently hold 6. But what I am most fascinated by is the margin that some of these more competitive districts offer to the Democratic Party. In terms of a possible flip in the future, Wisconsin doesn't really provide that, at least not in the immediate. The only district that really was super competitive in the last election was Wisconsin's 3rd district. Rebecca Cook took on Dan Van Orden, who won by 2.7% in this district. Now, Wisconsin's 3rd was drawn to be more competitive, but the Republican Party still has the upper hand. This district in a blue year should go to the Democratic Party, but even then you would end up with a congressional map that would be 5 Republicans to 3 Democrats. Chances are Democrats would be winning across the state, and that map wouldn't represent, ideologically speaking at least, how the state voted and their respective party vote share. And this actually happened before in Wisconsin. It's no stranger to congressional gerrymanders. In 2018, when Republicans had control of the Wisconsin State Supreme Court, the Democrats knew they couldn't contest the map. And so they competed with it. They decided to go after Paul Ryan's seat when he was going to retire. They decided that they were going to invest heavy into this state, and they won by a massive margin in the popular vote. In 2018, Democrats won by 8 points across the state of Wisconsin. But you guessed it correctly, Republicans maintained their majority in the Wisconsin delegation, holding 5 seats to the Democrats' 3. This is again in a state the Democrats were winning by 8 points. An even more egregious gerrymander you can find in Wisconsin in the same exact year. I know it feels like we're going a bit off on a tangent here, but it's important to note exactly what was the line of thinking for the Wisconsin GOP when they drew these maps after the 2010 midterm elections. In the Wisconsin State Assembly elections, Democrats won the popular vote by a margin of 8 percentage points across the state, and yet got about a third of the seats overall. This gerrymander was impeccable. The Republican Party was able to maintain every seat but one, despite Democrats taking the popular vote from 2016, where they actually lost it to the GOP by about 6 points. The map was 64-35. In 2018, this gerrymander held up in such a tremendous way for the GOP. And Democrats, again, seeing a 13-point shift across the state, 14-point shift actually across the state, only gained 1 seat out of a total number of 99. And so the Wisconsin State Assembly actually did end up getting redrawn. In the 2024 election, you can see that the map was a lot more favorable towards the Democratic Party. It looks a lot better for the Democratic Party. And again, that's because the map that looks like this was drawn by the Wisconsin GOP legislature. Then Democrats got the majority in 2023. They struck down the map. And in 2024, the map looks entirely different. And Democrats, despite losing the popular vote across the state by about 2 points, gained about 10 seats across the state, which puts them within reason to win the majority in the next election. But getting back to what we're focusing on, which is the congressional maps here, the Democratic Party continuing to fight in this lawsuit here might actually hold up. And what that would mean is that the map here in 2024 can end up looking different. We've seen states, especially in the Midwest, have to redraw, in some cases, right before a Democratic midterm election. In 2016, the Republican Party had this gerrymander drawn in the state. You can actually see at different periods of time it had been more egregious, but this is the map they drew after they had control of the state legislature and they had control and were able to override what we saw here for the GOP. The point is that Republicans had the governorship. They had some Democratic opposition, but again, huge GOP majority. They were able to override it. They didn't really matter there, and they weren't able to filibuster or prevent any of these maps from being implemented. And Republicans had about 13 seats. In the 2012 election, Democrats had about 5. By the time it was 2014, it locked in. 2016, it locked in. But then, in 2018, the map had to be redrawn, and look what happened. Democrats got 9 seats, and Republicans got 9 seats. And it actually was a lot fairer, right? Pennsylvania was a state that Trump won by less than 50,000 votes. And so to think about that in context, this is a state that was decided by less than a point, and it was a state that was decided by about a point in the next election, and then by about a point in 2024. So it makes sense there's a split delegation. And so after 2020, the map was drawn in a way that was fairer, but Democrats lost some seats in 2024. You can see they lost in the 7th district, they lost in the 8th district, they lost in the 10th district, but Democrats are hoping that in the next election, they could win it back. But this is a great example of a state that does swing with the electorate. Pennsylvania went from being blue for Josh Shapiro and John Fetterman to red for Donald Trump and Dave McCormick, and could go back to being blue for whoever in 2026. And that map will reflect it. So looking at Wisconsin, here's what we might see. Wisconsin's 8th and Wisconsin's 1st are the 2 districts right now that seem to be targeted by Democrats, but they are very much out of reach for all intents and purposes. These are districts that the Republican Party won by pretty significant amounts, and it would be a huge win for Democrats if they were able to get it, but it would be an unsustainable one that would only last through the next election, assuming that it happens. The only realistic possibility is in Wisconsin's 3rd. So then Democrats are hoping they redraw the map. What that would likely look like is that potentially Wisconsin's 5th Wisconsin 6th could get some Democratic regions drawn into the district. Right now, the Democrats are compacted into the 4th and into the 2nd. This was done with intention. These two Democrats here, both of them are winning by 53 points and 40 points, and while that may be good for them personally, it's not good for Democrats across the state. Because you have 3 districts here that have Republican and Democratic votes dispersed, but obviously with an intentional Republican draw. And just take a look at the way that some of these districts are drawn. They're drawn in a way that is meant to be beneficial to the GOP. You don't end up with maps like this for no reason, right? These congressional maps are ugly, but they shouldn't be this ugly unless there is some, again, intentionality behind the way this map is being drawn. And so thinking about the 2026 midterms, if Democrats were able to get a successful redraw in the state of Wisconsin, well, what you might find too is that it's able to counteract the inevitable redraw in Texas. We've seen that Democrats have floated the possibility that they will redraw in states like California, maybe even New York. But Wisconsin could be one of those sleeper states that on the margins may seem like it doesn't matter. 1 seat, 2 seats, 3 seats being gained by the Democratic Party, how much of a difference does that make? But when Texas is taking away 5 seats from the Democratic Party, gaining 1 or 2 in Wisconsin, and then maybe having California redraw or another state redraw does actually make a difference. It does actually benefit the Democratic Party, and it does actually make the election that much more competitive or winnable for the National Democratic Party. And so I'm interested to see how the Wisconsin Dane Circuit Court holds up this case. I believe, more likely than not, especially given the partisan composition of the courts in Wisconsin, will decide the Wisconsin maps must be redrawn. The state Supreme Court, assuming that this was some type of long game plan and that they weren't that they aren't pro-gerrymander and that they weren't just running for no reason in the Supreme Court race, will uphold that decision. And it will be appealed by the U.S. Supreme Court, to which we will see what they decide on the case. But there's a very real possibility the Democrats get through this redistricting process and actually succeed with a new map in Wisconsin. It would be good for Democrats. It's no guarantee, but it's something that could change the margins in 2026, which could make all the difference for the next 2 years of governing under Donald Trump's second administration. And so it'll be fascinating to watch. Keep your eye out for news from the courts here in Wisconsin, because, again, they're calling the shots and will likely have a very big impact on the 2026 midterms, even if we don't think that it will this early on. There's a lot that can be unpacked from Wisconsin, especially as a battleground state. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.